time. There is like some move now towards some decreasing of the interest rising quickly. This is, I don't think this is for the video interesting, but for me, yes.
So if you look at the so remember the mode is 42%, but that's way higher than the normally the share is something like 20.
So I understand between US and China, but I didn't understand the part of the.
We are expecting the volume of world merchandise trade to grow by 2.6% in 2024, so this year, and then by 3.3% in 2025, so next year, following a larger than expected decline of the volume of world merchandise trade in 2023 by 1.2%. And the downgrade of the figure for 2023 is mainly due to the worse than expected performance of Europe, which in turn we attribute to the effect of inflation and energy prices. If you think about the big picture, trade has been incredibly resilient. You know, we've had a global pandemic, we've had escalating geopolitical tensions, we've had high inflation, we've had a restrictive monetary policy, we've had limited fiscal space now, and overall we're looking at trade growth for this year and next year. So overall I think it's not bad news. So we are still monitoring these trends closely, these trends towards fragmentation around geopolitical lines. So one thing we see is that trade between China and the United States is not growing as fast as trade of these economies with third countries. So in particular, their bilateral trade is growing by 30% less than their trade with other countries. But it's not just specific to China and the United States. We are, of course, all concerned about geopolitical tensions and what they might do to international trade. What we are a little bit less concerned about than we were in October and also last year is inflation, high energy prices, also the central bank response to it. Not because these are not important issues anymore, but we have clearly seen inflation come down. But we definitely don't see any deglobalization. So if you think about the relationship between trade growth and GDP growth, for example, over the past few decades, what you see that in the 1990s, the relationship was almost 2 to 1. So trade grew almost twice as fast as GDP. So that was clearly a period of thriving globalization. And now, after the financial crisis, so if we start looking at, say, 2010 until now, it's about 1 to 1. So we still don't see any deglobalization as is often reported. You might call it a slowbalization. I mean, I think we're clearly in an important point in the history of globalization where I think a lot of governments are evaluating or re-evaluating perhaps their trade policy choices. And of course, this is going to have consequences on how international trade is going to develop. I think at this point, what I'm mainly thinking about is trade policy uncertainties, so the very fact that you don't know how some of these policy choices are made.